Hey guys, welcome to the Game Dev Discussion Podcast. This is episode 43, and we have a very special guest. We have Jonathan Benainous on, Warner Brothers senior texture artist based in Montreal. How we doing, bro?
Hey man, how's it going? Thanks for having me today. It's finally great that we can talk together.
A year down the line, we got there. You
Finally there.
So you're off the back of being a very busy boy. You blow up the internet with all these materials you've been doing and this substance source stuff, man. Like, have you had chance to breathe over this past year?
Yeah, that was a pretty tough year, to be honest. It was super busy. The year started like crazy with the GDC talk I had to give in March. Then after this, I had to start working on my signature series that have been released recently, and that was a long run. 2019 was definitely one of the most crazy year for me, but I'm glad I'm done. That's been released in January. The feedback so far amazing. Really happy to be able to share all this work with people, and I'm really happy with the result as well. I had this idea in mind when I started to talk with the substance source team, and I'm glad I finally could make it basically make what I had in mind. So it's cool.
Did you when you were you and the substance guys were talking? Did you expect at the beginning to be doing 3 sets? That's what surprised me. I saw the first set and I was like, oh shit, nice, he's dropped this is cool. And then he dropped the second one, I was like, oh shit, he's in the second, okay, yeah, this is sick, yay. And then it's the third one, I was like, holy fuck, this guy's doing a lot of work. Did you plan that from day one, or did it sort of just happen?
Well, actually, when I started to talk about the subject with them, I knew that people mainly know me because I made that barrack ceiling, and people started to follow me, and I wanted to do something in the same style, based around art surface and architecture, because I really love this. Mm-hmm. And the plan here was really to try to show how designer could be flexible and useful even when it's about making art surface materials, and show how you can create different branches in your graph to change a wall facade, for instance, and create very different variations out of the same texture. So when I started to think about this, I also had in mind, okay, how do I want to present my materials? So, I could have just created a few plans, put 2 or 3 lights and make it look good like that, just a few close up, and it would have been great. But I was like, well, I want to create 3 collection of materials, inspired by 3 different theme. Mm-hmm. So I was like, why not creating environment from each of this architecture style? And it also helped me to find the different materials that I wanted to create. So one of this material was a sort of hero texture. So for the Art Deco corridor, it was the elevator door, who was really the main piece. For the Victorian office, it was the library.
Yeah.
And for the Haussmannian building, it was the door. Who really started to bring me these ideas of, okay, I can build up an environment out of these textures. And also, I spent almost 10 years in my career as an environment artist. So I naturally, wanted to try to showcase this texture in situation, because it's always good to, use them on something else than just on a sphere. Yeah. So I really wanted to also have fun with the textures I created, and show as well like all the presets and stuff like this. So I started pretty early to have this idea to like make this environments.
Dude, I've got to ask, it's quite funny because people like yourself, any of the sort of, I want to say successful artists, guys who are churning out work, it's easy for a lot of people to look and go, oh damn, they're killing it, this is great. How did you manage this as a person though? Like, because like you said, you did your GDC tour, you've got a full-time job as a texture artist,
Yeah.
and then you're coming home and doing all this work. I mean, were there lulls in work? Were there times? Because I know what it's like with these sort of architecture type materials. I don't know if it's the same for you. A lot of it, it's easy to get. I don't want to say bored. Bored's the wrong word, but you're repeating a lot of the same processes. And I know I find once I've done one architecture type piece, I'm like, I need a little bit of a break from this just to sort of refresh and get myself back in the groove. Now, you have three whole collections put together. I feel as if you don't get that breathing space. So how have you like managed just, not getting, I don't want to say burnt out, but getting any fatigue while doing it? And also, you're doing a full-time job while doing all this sort of stuff. How was it managing that?
Well, actually, I'm not gonna lie and say it was an easy thing. It was not. It was definitely not, and I really worked hard on it. Basically, I mainly like I was doing this like for maybe let's say 4 months, almost full time. So I was like going to the job, finishing my days, going back home, and add my second shift and work like until like 1 or 2 a.m. And I was just doing this like over and over again, and the weekend as well. So at some point, I was struggling with the like, okay, I can't really see my girlfriend like I want. I need to deal with that. I'm also far from my family. I'm also far from my friends that are in France. I also have friends there in Montreal, but like your like close friends are not there to support you. So that was difficult for sure to deal with it. But I still had this goal in my mind, and I was like, this is a signature series, right? So I had to deliver something great. It's also like, I'm coming after like Daniel Tiger, Ben Wilson, Chris Hudson, like all this amazing artists that I like really admire. They're super talented, and I couldn't just do like something quickly and just say, okay, it's done. I really wanted to show that, okay, you asked me for a signature series. I'm just gonna give 100% of what I can do, and just try to have fun as much as I can with it. But yeah, that was pretty rough, to be honest, and that's why from the beginning of the year, for Christmas I took like a month of break, and since the beginning of the year I'm more like chilling out, just enjoying my weekends, my evenings. So no more personal stuff for now. I'm just like trying to start on a new page, and feel comfortable again to get back to it and just say, okay, I'm gonna start a new project, and I feel I'm ready for it. So yeah, I just take some time, and I'm not like feeling guilty of not working in the evening anymore. I'm like,
Yeah, I
because
know exactly what you mean.
just you see that thing, because you're like, okay, I want to just like relax and watch a series, but I know that I had a shit load of work to do and I'm late, so I shouldn't do that. I should keep working. And actually it's like that feeling is not there anymore, because I delivered what I wanted to deliver. I'm happy with the quality. I made what I had in mind, and that's cool. I'm cool with this. So I had this target. I did it. I'm glad I did it, and now I can just enjoy some free time and chill
Just out of
out.
curiosity, does that sensation, I know exactly what you mean with the sort of like you want to just switch off and chill, and you've accomplished your goal, which is like I get that. Has the urgency creeped back in yet? Like, so I know for me right now, obviously I've started with ArtStation, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna just chill for a bit. Like, I'm just gonna relax, and I'm already getting itchy. I mean, it's not even been a month, and I'm like, I'm starting to get, fidgety. I'm like, okay, what can I do next? What's my next thing? I need to start doing my next thing. Because I know, people like yourself, and I put myself in this category as well, like the guys who like to be busy and like to do a lot of things. For me, I struggle to switch off. I'm curious, do you have the same thing where like, okay, yeah, I'm going to give myself that time to relax and chill now, but do you have any inkling to still like, oh, well, I kind of could start something new and start a new project? Like, does that creep in for you?
Well, actually, I totally understand what you're saying because, it was more like during the past few years, basically. So I was a Quantic Dream, then I went to Guerrilla Games in Amsterdam. Then I came back to France, to Paris, to work for Ubisoft. And in the meantime, and very early in my career, I started to understand that if you want to like really progress in your skill, you have to do some personal work on the side, because sometime at work you're not just like learning some, if you want to learn how to bake a props, if you're a level artist, you're probably not gonna have the chance to do it at work, depending where you work. So you need to be like super comfortable with all these fundamentals, and I think it's very important for every artist to be comfortable with everything, even lighting and stuff like that. So I really early felt that it was important for me to make personal work on my free time to just be better. And after a few years, you realize that, okay, during every lunch, I'm gonna doodle and do some personal stuff because it's easy. You're still at work. You're like, you can eat, do a few things, and it becomes a sort of routine. And I think it's easier to keep that routine on, to always do a little project on the side, just a material or something, just to get in the same kind of mood of creation, instead of like stopping everything for maybe 6 months or a year, and after restart the machine is like, it's harder in a way, so
just a curious question. You've mentioned something then. You mentioned that you've done a lot of different things. You've worked as many different types of artists. You're I want to say you're a generalist, but you've tried your hand at different things. Now, there is a curious thing I've noticed with the industry. People are becoming, material art is becoming a full-time gig. Is there a concern, and I don't even know if this is a concern or not, because you don't know where the industry is going to go in the next 5-6 years, but I see people look up to the likes of yourself, Josh, Daniel, Javier, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a materials artist. Like, okay, I'm just going to do nothing but materials, because that's all they've got is just materials. And I'm like, I know all of you guys work quite well, and I'm like, Daniel was a Bungie as the lead artist. Like, Josh did environment art on Call of Duty. Yourself, you've done environment art. You're not just a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
Is just from your sort of professional point of view, is it a concern? Is it a concern that there's people who are thinking that all that they need to do is just be materials artists and that's it? That's all they need to do, because especially this past year, because I've been doing a lot of university talks, and I'm going into uni sometimes, and there's kids showing me their portfolios, and it's nothing but materials, and like, oh yeah, all I want to do is materials. And I'm kind of like, oh, that's cool. Have you looked into like 3ds Max or like Modo or Blender or Maya? And they're like, not really. Like, and I don't know. I just in the back of my head, I don't know if it sits right with me, because I'm kind of like, all the big material artists I know, they have a knowledge and a grounding in environment art or some sort of a discipline. Just what's your take on that?
Yeah, it totally makes sense to me, what you're saying, basically, because When I started, basically, just for the little story, the first job I get, it was uh, to be a concept artist. I
Oh,
was doing a
really?
lot of 3D. Yeah, it was really bad. If I just like take my thing back, and then I'm never gonna show them to anybody. But anyway, it was for a small company called Nico Entertainment. The company doesn't exist anymore, but I started like as a concept artist and character artist. So I've done this for like a few months. Then I just told them, hey guys, I want to do 3D. So they decided to give me a test. I did it, and they called me back maybe like a few weeks later, and they gave me a 6 months contract, and I started to work on my first video game, so on a PS2. Anyway, so I think it's totally important, and you're totally right. Young artists needs to be aware that to be a texture artist, it's also super important to understand why this texture, how this texture are going to be used.
Yes.
And it has a purpose. It's not supposed to be showcased on a sphere and that's it. It's going to be used in a video game the most of the time. So you need to understand what's the process to build up a whole environment. And before to build this environment, you need to understand what is pixel ratio, texel density, all this kind of stuff, how to make proper UVs, all the thing. These fundamentals are really important, and you need to first learn this, eventually like learn how to sculpt in ZBrush, bake in assets, all this. This is, for me, it's just one same thing, once you're like comfortable with all these things, you can make textures, and you will know when you need to create a trim texture, when you need to create like a tileable texture, when you need some decals, what kind of detail you can add in your texture, this kind of thing, but you need to learn a bit of everything and be comfortable with that to be able to create like good texture for video games. So, and the other point is, I think young artists also forget sometimes when they take a look at ArtStation, they're like, oh yeah, they're making like crazy textures with like layers of, I don't know, branches, dirt, leaves, stuff like that. And they think that this is the kind of texture that we're going to create in production.
Yeah. This is
And
hilarious.
yeah, and this is not the case. We're doing this on our free time because we have fun. We know the rules, so we can bend the rules and play with that. And this
I
is
think,
something
yeah.
that it's something that young artists sometimes don't get, and they miss something in the fact that we're having fun with the program, but this is not what we're gonna do in production. So yeah.
Yeah, because Ben Wilson, I had a really good conversation with Ben Wilson about this. When I did like a padded space bag material, and I leveraged Marvelous Designer as an external resource, and I was talking to Ben as he was helping me refine my portfolio, and I was kind of like, I don't know how I feel about any of these materials. Like, let's be realistic, none of these materials get used in production. I'm using Marvelous Designer. Is that cheating? We're going through all my stuff, and he made a really good point. He was like, by doing these types of materials, you're showing the people who are going to hire you, you're kind of flexing on them. You're showing how much control you have over the software, how you're able to create shapes in the software. Is this going to be used in production? No way. Like, you can't afford that kind of tessellation. However, you're showing the people looking at your portfolio how much control you have over the software. And then to come back to like the Marvelous Designer thing, he made a really good point. He was like, there's a certain amount of understanding of the software to know when it's time to leave the software and leverage other pieces of equipment and other types of software to help achieve a goal. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, I think that's the bit which a lot of students miss, is they see, a good example is Javier's axe he did, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna do like lots of that type of stuff, and I'm gonna think about that, and or your architecture materials or my architecture materials, and they miss the point that you are purely showing your control over the software. It's nowhere near. I don't think actually on my portfolio I have any materials which I'd say are suitable for production, really.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the deco ones. I think the deco ones probably are, actually, because they're quite robust. But it's understanding it, like it's understanding that these materials are not representations of what the day job looks like. Like I said, the day job looks like, oh, do I need to make a trim? Do I make a tile board? Do I need to make a decal? Is it a detail normal I need to make? The day job is far more, I don't want to say simple, but like, you're not getting to make crazy baroque ceilings or, whole environments using a designer. Like, it's just not what a materials artist job is. And I think there is a little bit of that creeping in from some of the portfolios I was looking at. And actually, you mentioned there's one other thing as well, is we don't know what the material art role is going to look like in 6 years. Like, look how much has changed over this past decade. We, beginning of the decade, we're only starting to look at stuff like Substance, and we've gone from ZBrush textures to designer textures to now potentially, photo scans and Quixel. And as a materials artist, I'm just curious actually, as like, 'cause obviously you've done a lot of your stuff in designer. Have you looked at Quixel Mixer much? Have you had a look? Have you had a dabble? Or are you sort of not quite dipped your toe in yet?
Well, I tried it a bit at work, because basically sometimes we just need to, because I can't say much about the game I'm working on, but we have a sort of like subtle stylization. So the thing is with scan is that you can't add this kind of twist in the height, and you can't exactly have the touch that you want, because it's just a scan basically. So this is why we mainly use Substance Designer and Substance Painter, but we use some texture from Megascan, and this is mainly like for ground and stuff like this. Like, for instance, if you need to have some dirt, you don't especially need to like stylize that dirt, and you can spend more time on eventually like trim textures that are really like custom to building or something like this. And we really try to put the effort on what's going to be like rewarding afterward on screen. So we mainly use like a Megascan for this kind of not especially super interesting textures like dirt and mud, or very random things like that, because we want to spend more time on eventually like ornaments, specific type of bricks if you want to stylize them, same for the ground, but this is a totally valid tool if you want to have like a realistic result. When when I look at the different environment coming out from Quixel, when you see these guys just play with the library and like deliver like amazing environment, of course it looks great. But if you don't want to do like something realistic like that, you're kind of screwed in a way. So this is the only issue for me, but.
It's quite nice for, like, I suppose, so where I see its value is, like, I kind of see it as, like I said, the unimportant stuff. You don't want to spend 3 weeks working on a material. It's like, okay, dirt, I need some dirt, I need like 4 versions of this dirt, and maybe some with stones, and maybe some with twigs, and you can easily just like go into Mixer and real quickly throw dirt together, and like with some twigs, and like export it, and then also do a version with stones. And it's super quick to like generate a robust set of materials. But if you want, like you said, the detail and the stylization, because this is something actually I think people forget. Very few games are actually one-to-one realistic to real world. Nearly every single game has to be stylized, because look at props and environments and weapons and characters. You have to push the bevels just a little bit further. You have to just push the normals a little bit further so that it reads on screen. I think the only game where like I've seen, is this even fair to say? I'd say maybe Battlefield is one of the ones where I've seen them really try and stick one-to-one with real life. But even then, their weapons are a little bit stylized. because they just have to push the stuff like the geo and the bevels a little bit further.
Mhm.
But just out of curiosity, in production, I'm gonna like make something hypothetical here because obviously you can't talk about specifics. A trim texture in Designer, in production, how long would you spend on a trim texture in Designer?
Well, usually it depends of the amount of details, of course, and if it's like, let's say it's 2K texture, like a square one, I would say a day, like,
Really?
yeah, a day or two max, because
That's how quick you're rattling through them. You're literally just doing a couple of days texture done, couple of days texture done,
yeah,
literally that quick. Damn.
yeah, yeah, and this is I think at some point where you're not like struggling with the tool and you're like, okay, the program, I'm not even thinking about the program, how I'm going to do things. I just already know how I'm going to do
Yeah, you
them.
know how to
So
tackle any problem.
yeah, it's like it's and that was definitely like the purpose of making like textures like this barrack ceiling. Some people didn't get it, and they were like, yeah, but it doesn't make sense to do this in Designer. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but as long as you know how to do this, you can do whatever you want after this, right? So that was just a study, and it was to practice. So like after all these years, now I'm happy that I just have to focus on the aspect creation, and you still always have stuff to learn, of course. And when you're working with your colleagues, each time you're like, oh, you how did you do that shape? Oh, okay, you've done that way. Oh, that's cool. I didn't think about it. And even like going through graphs from artists, it's always super interesting, and I still learn stuff. So I'm definitely not saying that I know everything in Designer. That's not the point. I'm always gonna have stuff to learn, but I mean, as long as you not like stuck with the program and you can just focus on on the creation aspect, it's really cool to just do whatever you want, go through it, and just like tackle the next material, etc. So
Is that
yeah,
the
I would say yeah,
Sorry, is that the
yeah.
difference there between a mid-level artist, texture artist, and a senior? Because I always think about this, because as a texture artist, you kind of can't be a texture artist without a pretty strong grasp of the software. It's not like you start and you're having to learn Substance Designer. Like, if you're a texture artist professionally, you already know the software really, really, really well. So, like, is that difference between a mid-level, say, texture artist and a senior? Is the fact that you can be given almost anything and you sort of have a plan of attack straight away of how to tackle it, whereas a mid-level artist might be comfortable with some things but not with other things. Like, where's the threshold between being a senior and a mid texture artist?
Well, I would say that sometime a mid texture artist would potentially don't know how to tackle some materials,
Right.
because it's it seems obvious, but if you've never done wood in Substance Designer, you don't know how to make wood in Designer, and you're just gonna try again and again how to like create this kind of shapes. And when you find like the solution, or the easy way is just to watch tutorials and go through graphs from other artists and just find IDs. And when you're like, okay, so this guy did it that way, but this other one did it that way, so maybe I can like find my own recipe, and create something out of this knowledge that I took from here and there. And I think it's mainly like the difference. Like a mid texture artist probably gonna be like, okay, I got this task to do, but some of them I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it, if I can make it. And when you're a senior, you don't even think about how I'm gonna do this, or the most of the time, yeah, you just do it. Or sometimes you're just like, what is the best solution for this? And you're sometimes gonna talk with your colleagues to like think together about, okay, I need to do that kind of material. Do you think I should like ZBrush a few assets and just plat them around the Designer, or would you like use another approach, or whatever. Sometimes it's not like obvious, but technically you don't have you don't you shouldn't have any issue to make things basically.
You know what? It's interesting. You mentioned the ceiling material, and people were like, "Ah, it doesn't make sense to do it like that." You know what? I think a real good like answer to that is just. I know you've read my recent article with experience. Sorry, with 80 level with my ceiling, and I said that material is timeless. It's that material that every material artist knows. You see it, they know that material, and every art. I think nearly every big artist, material artist, has that material. You know, Javier did it with the axe. Enrico did it with his JRO tutorials. James Ratosa did it with his marvelous designer experiments. Is that element there too behind like doing these sort of fancy materials? Because for you, we sort of spoke about this a little bit previously, but it was you did your GDC talk and then you did a substance source, and even before all that, you already had a ton of content anyway, and you sort of snowballed this brand and this idea of you as an artist. Is it, these types of materials are kind of also what's the best way to describe this? A advertisement, I suppose. It's kind of like, it's just, let's make something that looks really, 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 really cool. Like, because that material now, like I said, is completely timeless. Like, every material artist knows it. And whether or not, between the material art community, no one sits there and goes, oh, well, there's no point doing it like that. You could do it in ZBrush or in Max way quicker. No one says that. People just go, it's a fucking sick material, and the conversation stops there. Is there that element of it too? Like, I'm just going to make this purely to just, make something cool and not flex on people, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm not showing anything to employers. I'm not showing anything new or crazy. I'm just really showing off how good I can do this type of thing. And it's the kind of thing that will grow your brand as a person and get eyes on your profile, on you. Because, artists are a business. Being an artist, you have to have business mindsets. You have to grow your brand. You have to grow your presence on platforms because you're trying to gain, you're competing. So something like the ceiling, does that fall into that category, do you think, or does that not even enter your mindset?
Well, actually, I would say that everything is a bit connected. I started I think it was in 2015. I made that sci-fi helmet, so it's originally it was just a ZBrush study. I wanted to learn how to make art surface in ZBrush. So I started this project, I designed it myself, and I made that helmet. Then when I released it, I was like, hey, okay, maybe like some people might be interested by a tutorial for it. So I was in contact with 3D Artist magazine, and they just asked me, they were like, man, we love your work. Would you be up to do like a step-by-step tutorial for us? So I started to write my first article for them, and I wrote a second one, a third one, a fourth one, and I basically wrote like 6 or 7 articles for 3D Artist magazine. But first, when I was reading that magazine when I was younger, I was like, shit, if one day I'm in this magazine, it would be ace. And the first time I had the chance to write an article for them, they proposed me to put my sci-fi helmet on the cover. I was like, oh my god, this is crazy, and this is something that I always wanted to do. So write articles, like try to share my knowledge with artists, but also that's true that you're kind of become. It's not like being a personality or something like this. You're not a star or whatever. You're just like a texture artist making your stuff, or an environment artist, or basically like, let's say, 3D artist, and you're doing your thing. But at some point you realize that people start to like follow your work, and they're kind of like waiting for the next piece. So you're like, okay, yeah, it gives me like motivation to have all this great feedback from people saying, okay, man, I really love what you've done with this. Like, can't wait what you're just gonna release. Can't wait for the next one. So you're like, okay, well, let's see how I can like improve my knowledge by doing another personal project. And each time I started to work on something personal like this, it was always within mind, okay, I want to be better at this. And I was not like, I want to get famous. That was definitely not the point. And I never done a project to you know, get more follower or stuff
Hmm.
like this. I'm not like, releasing stuff for releasing stuff.
Yeah.
If, last year, okay, the signature collection was something like special, but previously during the year, I just released my damage wall, and I used it for the second part of my GDC talk. So I used
Hmm.
my barrack ceiling and my damage wall, and that's it. I didn't do any other material. So I'm not gonna make things to do things. So I'm just like doing them to learn from it. And this is this is definitely the point. But if you're doing things that you love, you learn stuff, so it's super good for you. You get better, and if people like it and you have more people who follow you, it's always great. But I'm not doing piece of art to get more followers. I'm really like
Hmm.
doing it because I love it and because I want to, create something new, and create something that I have in my mind, or like reproduce a sort of like a mood or environment that I've seen during vacation or stuff like this. This is the kind of thing that I have in mind when I start working on personal project.
Just out of curiosity, you mentioned. I just want to come back to something you mentioned earlier. You said you find it motivating when people are like they follow you. You have a following. You have a fan base. People who like your stuff, and they're like, oh, I can't wait to see the next thing. And you said that's motivating for you. Is that ever? Is there ever have a detrimental effect? Are you ever like? I don't want to say it's not the pressure, but like people are like, oh, when's the next thing coming? What's the next thing going to be? And is there like an element of pressure, I suppose is the best way to describe it, where you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to one up myself again, or people are expecting something of me? Is there any of that creep into your mindset, or is it kind of like, does it not affect you?
No, I think you're totally right. Basically, you have like the positive way, so it's like it's motivation, so it's great. So it pushes you to like move forward and say, okay, let's jump on a new thing. Let's see what I can do. But it's also a lot of pressure sometimes because you're like, okay, um, people are expecting something good. Am I capable of doing something that good again? And sometimes it's hard, but you need to face it. And I think it's still positive, to have this kind of pressure because you want to do something good, and it helps you to push yourself further. And as long as you're capable of finding this balance between positive and negative things, uh, I think it's a good thing to just move on and keep growing and moving forward. But when I really realized this support, it was after this GDC talk. I had like, I don't know, 10 or 15 people coming to me next to the stage, like asking me for feedback, like showing me portfolios and stuff. And they were like sometime like kind of shaking and super like excited and scared at the same time to see me. But I was like, guys, relax, just breathe. It's okay. We're just
I'm
like,
just an artist.
yeah, it's fine. We're just like normal people. It's totally fine. But in a way, I realized that people were sometimes like really like fan of the work I was doing, and I really didn't like, I didn't realize that at all.
Well, you got to bear in mind, I think the thing to remember is as well is you transcend being an artist at that point. Like when you're giving GDC talks, or you're doing these articles for 3D artists or 3D World, and you're doing these tutorials and this substance source stuff. Okay, yeah, the art is a platform for you to do that, but the reason people, like I say, get so excited to probably see you and speak to you and want to get your opinion is you as a person are embodying a lot of the stuff that people aspire for. And what I mean by that is, creating art's one thing. A great piece of art is a great piece of art, and it is what it is. Being a type of person that can speak and teach and be a figurehead within their domain and their field in the industry. Because, I put you're up there with people like Josh and Daniel, like, as the figureheads of material art right now. And to be someone like that, it isn't just about the craft of creating materials. If all you did was create materials and you never chirped up on social media, you never did anything outside of that, I'd pretty much put money on you wouldn't be, where you are today. The fact that you are willing to teach people and talk to people and support people is what grows. As a fan base, I don't like the idea of a fan base, but a following. I think that's why people, like you said, when they come to the GDC talks and they want to speak to you after and they're so excited, it's because of everything you do as a person. I don't think it's necessarily although the art's sick, don't get me wrong, like I said, the art goes without saying, but being the sort of person who's on stage there teaching and talking to people and because it takes a certain level of bravery, of courage to be able to do that not everyone possesses. So then people like yourself and Josh and these guys, it's a very rare thing, and I think that's why people appreciate it so much, and that's why people are so excited by what you do and what you have to say, because you are that type of person who's willing to say it. And it's when you can do that and also be kind of not humble about it, but understand that you're also still learning. I think it just resonates so much with the public and the people who are listening and watching what you have to say. But there is one thing to go with it as well. It's interesting hearing you talk about, when I asked about the pressure thing, and it still comes back to, like, it's a challenge and it's a positive. You turn it into a positive. I want to lead this into something you mentioned previously off air. You have moved around quite a lot. You've worked in Amsterdam. You're from France originally. You're now in Montreal.
Yep.
I know from speaking to a lot of people, that's the big blocker for a lot of people, is because opportunities sometimes mean you have to leave your home country. It's interesting to talk to Kem about this. Kem went to Russia, then he came back to the UK, and he's been all around the place. And that, again, it comes back to sort of courage, I suppose, but being able to tackle these opportunities and challenges positively is something I think is quite important. Now, I'm just curious, what for you, what did that look like? Because you already said about how there's a positive aspect to all this sort of stuff. Like I said, it's a challenge and there's an opportunity. What things were difficult during all these times when you're having to move around and take these chances? What were the sort of the scary bits, negative bits, the bits you didn't expect? Because the reason I want to get into this is because, like I said, I know plenty of people I speak to in the Discords and the community who struggle with this, and they get stopped by it. And what I want to be able to try and do is sort of shed some light on it so that they're aware of the challenges and they can sort of then tackle them knowing what the issues are. So yeah, when you're moving around and when you're moving around to these jobs, what were some of the sort of challenging aspects of it?
Well, yeah. Well, first, thanks for the very kind words, man. Really appreciate it. That's super nice. And yeah, I really try to, stay close to people and, share stuff as much as I can with them. Take the time to answer all the messages and stuff. I think it's very important because, I think it's just like respect, at some point when you have artists following you and supporting you. I think it's the least I can do to answer questions and emails and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's just being a human being, basically. It's not even being an artist. It's just being nice, and I think it's what everyone should do. So about the about you know, the fact to work abroad. Basically, for me, in my case, that was something super scary. And when I was in France, when I started to work for Quantic Dream after like 5 years there, almost 6 years. So I worked on Eevee Rain, I worked on Beyond Two Souls, and after this, I was like, okay, I would love to work abroad. I would love to see what it is to work in another country,
Mm-hmm.
and I get an opportunity to work at Guerrilla Games on Horizon Zero Dawn. So I get the interviews, and I was like scared as fuck because basically, you know, I my English is better now, but at like a few years back, that I was kind of struggling with my English, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when you know people from Amsterdam, they're like totally fluent. It's like if they were like born in England or in the US. So when you start with these guys, and when you're not especially comfortable with the way you talk in English, etc., it's scary, you know. Plus, you need to you know, when you start working for a company abroad, you have the pressure to, you know, deliver good content because you want to show that they hired you for reasons, right? So you start working there, you need to face the fact that it's not your mother tongue. You also need to um, make new friends. It's a lot of things, and the chance I had when I was in Amsterdam is that Paris is like 3 hour away from Amsterdam by train. So
Yeah.
it was each time was like kind of, you know, sad or something, or I missed my family, I could just take the train and go back to Paris just for like the weekend, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came back to Amsterdam on Sunday night, I was like refreshed and ready to go at work Monday. But my experience out there was really great. You know, that was my first experience abroad, and uh, the I think the hardest part was to, you know, sometime you have a girlfriend and you need to face this. You need to decide, okay, if the girl can't follow you, what am I gonna do?
Mm.
Because I've worked like, it's now, I started like almost like 15 years ago now in the industry, so it's kind of old. But you know, I worked my whole life for this career, and when it's about having opportunities, you just have to make a choice basically, because sometimes that person can't follow you everywhere, right? And it it's hard sometimes. You need to choose, and in my case, it was like sometimes like painful, of course, but the most of the time I chose my career because it was my dream to be where I am right now, and you know, keep growing, and keep, you know, explain myself in what I love to do. And unfortunately, you know, I if I had chose sometime uh, the girl, I, I I would at some point I would have been like, I'm maybe gonna regret that choice, you know.
It's
And
so funny you talk about this because this is exactly what I mentioned in the Art Station Learning course. It's like our careers, and this career is so challenging for the whole
yeah,
relationship, and like, and I don't mean relationship just as a girlfriend, having friendships, families,
yeah,
because we are in a weird position where most people in this industry will, like, at a drop of a hat, move somewhere. You know, they're looking for a job and they're based in, say, you know, the UK, and it's like, okay, an opportunity in Sony, Santa Monica, fine, that's it. I'm going to pick up my life, I'm going to move over there. Very few careers are like this, and I think it's something that's overlooked by people early on, is the fact that you have to be very willing to sacrifice a lot of your relationships, whether that's how close you are with your family, close friends, like you said, a love interest or a partner.
yeah.
It's super hard.
Yeah, definitely. And I it's funny because I had this talk with Josh Lynch when we met after GDC. Went for a few days in LA, and we talked about that with her wife. So we exactly had this talk, like facing the thing, because they have the chance to be together, etc. But when you start to be an expat basically, and you meet someone in another country, but you potentially have an opportunity in another place again, do that person can follow you, or should I start a relationship with someone, or should I just stay single because it's just easier for me to move wherever I want? Or but in the
Sorry,
other
do you
end,
actually think like that? So I've never heard that from an artist. Does that go through your head?
uh, what do you mean?
The maybe it's easier if I just stay single because then I can
Well,
move around. How's that gone through your head?
yeah,
Really?
it's hard, but at some point you're like, should I do this? Is it better for me? Is it better for that person that maybe gonna meet? But the thing is, I've always been like totally clear about my point, and all the time I just like say the truth, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm here, I'm expat, I'm from another country. I don't know how long, how much time I'm gonna stay there, but I'm maybe gonna go back home at some point because my parents are gonna get older. I don't want to let them alone, stuff like this, So you always have this kind of thing in your mind. So you're like, okay, I'm still young. I can like keep like living that dream, but at some point maybe I'm gonna be like more like, okay, I want to get my own family. I want to have children, stuff like this. So it's a whole thing, It's not about like being an artist, but it's like, what type of life do I want?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like doing the sacrifices right now, but I think in a few years I'm probably gonna like calm down and say, okay, well, I'm good where I am. I've done all what I wanted to do. um, I got a few achievements in my career. I'm happy with that. I don't have any regret. Now I can just like chill out and just enjoy life, and create my own family, and stay in a place where I feel good.
Yeah. That's hmm. That's an interesting way of thinking about it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've heard plenty of people come at it from that point of view. That's probably the best way I've heard it articulated. What it. I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Has that ever like challenged friendships? I know that's something I've struggled with in the past, and it was quite difficult. Is certain friendship groups don't understand the drive of being an artist. They don't understand the sacrifices you are willing to make, and they start kind of you know what I mean, like people who maybe aren't as ambitious, or just don't see it through your point of view, and it basically leads you to sort of having to cut ties with some very close friends because just their values and the way they see life maybe doesn't line up with yours. Now, being someone who is so you seem to have your sort of priorities pretty well set in terms of the career and the art and all that kind of stuff. Is that something you've had to go through as well, like cutting friendship ties? Because I feel like they're the harder ties to cut than anything else, because they're just people you like, you know what I mean, like they're the people you get on with. Yeah. Sometimes you have to cut them loose. Like, is that something you've had to face as well?
Well, I have the chance to have like very good friends in France that are like totally like supportive, and they're totally behind me, and they totally understand that I'm like trying to each time reach the next step, because they totally understand. They're like, man, keep it up, you're doing great, it's awesome for you. So it's really good to hear. But in the other end, that's true that some friends that you sometimes see a bit less, you you you're losing some people by doing this,
Hmm.
because sometime you're abroad, so the the time is not the same. So sometime when you want to call some friends, it's like they're sleeping or stuff like this. So you need to think, this is something that you don't especially think about when you decide to move abroad, but when you're like in the situation where you're like, okay, okay, I have a difference of 6 hours, okay, it can be a problem sometime. So
Yeah.
sometime you're gonna lose. I've lost some friends. I made some news, and I don't regret anything, honestly. If I had to redo if I had to redo something, I would exactly do the same, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Um, but sometimes it's like you can't have everything,
Yeah.
and that's the problem. And I do love to have everything, but sometimes I just can't.
Yeah.
And
It's, you know what, saying that, to having everything thing, that's, someone said something, I can't remember who it was, but it's like, you're not truly serious about something unless you're willing to sacrifice for it. So like we said, we've spoke about already, you're not serious about wanting to be an artist if you're not willing to sacrifice, for example, friendships,
yeah,
family, friends, all these kinds of sorts of things. Um, it's crazy to, it's weird, just talking about this, thinking about a lot of like sort of stuff that my friends have gone through, like as in other artists and myself. Um, but you did say you wrapped this actually nicely in a neat little bow, because you said, obviously if you were to redo it again, you have no regrets, you'd do it all the same. I don't know if you listened to past podcasts. The way I used to wrap them up was, we look back and we say, what would you do differently? And you've already answered that question. Now the way I've been thinking more, let's think forwards. So, in a year's time, as an artist, as a person, where do you hope to be? Do you hope to be, learn a particular piece of software, to develop in a certain way? I find it interesting asking this question to artists, because it really catches people, and it's interesting seeing who's thinking that far ahead. So yeah, in a year's time, where do you want to be as an artist or as a person?
well, I would like to you know um, keep working on what I do best, like textures, environment, stuff like this. So I want to be better at this. I wanted to try to do more ZBrush, because it's been a while since I didn't do any ZBrush project. So I would love to go back to it. So maybe create like a mix of, a bit of everything, environment, ZBrush sculpt, sci-fi thing,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a bit of designer, this kind of thing. And I also would like to, you know, try to um, eventually like teach to people, or try to do some mentoring and stuff like this, because I've been asked by a lot of people if I was like, if I had classes and stuff like that. And at work, this is something that I really love to do,
Mm-hmm.
like uh, helping out like young artists, like giving them advice, try to share like recipes and best practices. This is the kind of stuff that I love to do. And like seeing other artists like growing, because you're just like there to help them out and just give them like a few tips. It's so satisfying. This is really something that I love to do. So if time allows me, I would love to have classes or master class, or even like doing some live stream like I did with Substance was great. Being able to show some insight and share a bit more, my workflow, my way of thinking. If I can help like other artists, it's always something that is super great for me. I really love to do this. So yeah.
Dude, that sounds amazing. I mean, like I said, it's the fact that that's where your goals are. Is the fact that you just want to carry on helping people. It speaks volumes for you as a person, not just as an artist. But dude, we've been talking now for an hour. I love it, because every time I do this, like, it always seems like it's a shock to me. Even though this is now episode 43, I'm always like, shit, an hour's gone already. But I really appreciate you taking. I know you've literally just finished work, got home, and then jumped on this call. So I really appreciate taking the time to come and talk to me. Because you've said a lot of stuff on this podcast, which I think people are really. It's going to really resonate with a lot of people, and it's really going to help a lot of people as well. So yeah, thank you so much. What we'll say, guys, everyone listening. I always link people's art station anyway in the descriptions, but especially Jonathan's. Like, go check it out. Go check out Substance Source, the stuff he's been doing recently, and go into it with the mindset of this is over just 1 year. This is 2019. This snapshot of work you're going to see on his portfolio, and you'll see why. When I say this guy's a beast, there's a reason I say it. I'm not saying it lightheartedly. But Jonathan, it's been an absolute pleasure, dude. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you so much, man. Thanks for the kind words. Really appreciate. Thanks again for having me. And yeah, that was great. That was a nice talk. I'm really glad we finally did it. And yeah, thanks to everyone listening. And hope to see you soon at GDC. If you're coming, I'll be there. So
yeah, I'll catch you there, dude. All right,
awesome.
Take care, people. See you guys.